Good evening, everyone. It is February 8th, 2022, and we're here for our monthly CLERB County of San Diego meeting. Just diving right in today, because I do believe it'll be a lengthy meeting. I'll go ahead and ask Pastor Spriggs if he's present to call roll.
Susan Youngflesh.
Here.
Eileen Delaney.
Here.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr. I am present. Buki Domingos.
Here.
Oh, okay. Thank you, ma'am. Nadia Keen Ayub.
Present.
Thank you. Bonnie Kink.
Here.
Marianne Pintar. Marianne?
I'm here, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. Tim Ware.
Here.
Thank you. G.I. Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes roll call.
Thank you, Pastor Spriggs. Move on to agenda item number 2, which is public comment. Just so that the public is aware, this is for comments that are not addressed specifically with an agenda item. The comments related to agenda item will be taken prior to the discussion of each agenda item, and we'll seek public comment at that time. With that, Mr. Parker, do we have any general public comments?
We have several requests to speak. Some of them appear to be general in nature. The requests to speak that I have don't necessarily have agenda items filled out by the requesters. So, which is kind of problematic since we don't know what topic they want to talk about. I do have a few that are clearly related to cases. So I'm looking to see if Ione Daniels or Austin Daniels is on, and I don't see that they are. So what I would ask is, I'll keep an eye open for the two of them. Everyone else, well, let's see what we can do. Mary Best, we'll see if Mary Best is available, because she has listed that she wants to make a general comment under general item. So with that, Miss Best, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Your 3 minutes to address the CLERB starts now.
Thank you. My comment is general and somewhat specific, but mostly general, because there was so much detail in 2 reports that came out recently that this is best to be general. I'm a therapist and I'm a member of Racial Justice Coalition, and I first want to thank you all for the work you're doing to bring accountability and transparency to the County Sheriff's Department for long overdue changes within that system. I'm still absorbing the information from both the CPE and the state audit, but I want to say I support the board's recommendation, and very specifically the oversight of medical and mental health staff in the jails, and recommendations for every individual to receive at intake a comprehensive medical and mental health assessment so that they can be appropriately placed either in the jail or transported out of jail to an appropriate level of care in the community. Systemic disparities and negligence brought to light by the audit and CPA are really only well known by many in our communities of color who have had personal and painful experiences at the hands of law enforcement in and out of jail, families who ask for and can't get information on the cause or the circumstances of their loved ones who died in custody in order to make closure. We all as a community deserve better, and we have this moment to get it right with these recommendations. If we can but begin to trust that addressing these real problems will make our community stronger and healthier, and a community we can all be proud to call home. But it is beyond time that we expect and demand accountability. The lack of response by the department to recommendations may certainly require legislation at the state level, but I hope that you on the board will strongly advocate and request the full and active support of all county officials, including the Board of Supervisors and committees, to push for implementation of systemic changes that can potentially change the culture of law enforcement to their benefit and address real public safety and regain the community's trust. Thank you so much again for this as you enter this new phase of oversight of law enforcement. I wish you all well, and you have our full support in the community on this. Thank you again.
And Thank you. I do see that it appears that Ms. Daniels is on the call. So Ione Daniels, are you there? If you could unmute, I've given you permission to address the board. Ione Daniels? There you go.
Hi.
Hi, you have 3 minutes, Ms. Daniels. Your time starts now.
Hi, my name is Ione Daniels. I'm a resident of Vista for 30 years, and I experienced, I'm not really sure how to address the board meeting because I'm not really sure how this fits into what you're doing today. But it's just, all I have is my personal experiences, and I can say that I don't feel like I had enough time to prepare, because I think I found out Friday evening, and not complaints, but the things that I sent in were 2 different issues that are very big. So 3 minutes doesn't feel like that's long enough either. So I'm not sure if I can ask if I can have another chance to do this. And so I would like to have another chance to talk to the board, because I'm not really sure what your role is in regards to what I'm doing with CLERB. So I'm asking them to get an investigation started with the police department that the police is refusing to investigate, claiming it's civil when there's codes of federal, I believe, that I've come up with, and a penal code of falsifying documents with the court, false testimony, and so I have a few issues, plus my experience with them, with the PERT team, which I've gone to the sheriff's department many times, reaching out to the PERT team for help, and they have a lot of experience with me coming there physically to the station, saying I'm being put in distressing situations that I don't know how to get through when it's the legal system and abuse of power involved. So this is my experience in the nutshell, without getting into a lot of details, which would mean basically at least an hour to go into. So I'm asking for more time to get the investigation opened that they're calling civil, and also to re-examine the situation in which I was put on a 5150 when I went there voluntarily, and there was accusations that I didn't even know about when I arrived. So that's my basic situation with the Vista Sheriff's Department.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Your time is up. Next, we will move to Alex Blum, who has made a request to speak on public comment, a general comment. So, Alex Blum, are you there?
Hi, my name is Alex Blum. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I also want to generally express my gratitude for all the hard work the CLERB has done, and also to express my concern regarding the recent report from the auditor of the state of California. I see that's coming up later on the agenda, so we'll keep this relatively general. But I did want to emphasize the general conclusions that CLERB has a lot of opportunity to make its investigations more timely and especially more independent, and to rely far less on materials from the Sheriff Department. So I know you're going to go into that in greater detail later, so I will conclude my comments now, but I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Karen Remus. Ms. Remus, this is for general comment, general public comment, not specific to any other item on the agenda.
Thank you, Executive Officer Mr. Parker. Good evening, CLERB members. My name is Karen Remus. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I reside in zip code 92131. Multiple news agencies reported on last week's release of the sobering JWAC audit report of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. CLERB members, your work has never been more important. As a starting point, meaningful change must be immediately implemented in the Sheriff's Department's mental health intake system and safety check protocols. Please continue pressing for systemic change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Dr. Fishman. Dr. Fishman, this is for general public comment, and your time to address the CLERB starts now.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm back. Darwin Racial Justice Coalition, San Diego, North County Equity and Justice Coalition. Thank you for this opportunity to speak real quickly. I just want to say that I know that CLERB has been getting a lot of coverage and it's been put in the spotlight. And I would just hope that as we're moving forward, that I want to offer the general comments that you continue to engage with community and community organizations as you do this work. In particular, the CPE, I just wanted to say for the CPE report, the racial disparities, you're not mentioned directly or not put in the same way as the state audit or the state audit report. And I did want to make that connection that's really key for the community, which is one of the things that we're most concerned about, certainly I am as a Black man living here in San Diego and having to deal with law enforcement, is if there is racial disparities with racial profiling, and I can see that the civilian oversight is not holding anyone accountable for this, there's not anyone being dinged for this for law enforcement, then it does to me mean that there's a culture here for law enforcement where racial profiling really is okay. And it's also really apparent because you can even see it in the disparities. And we've now had 3 reports in the last 5 years that have substantiated this. And I do think that with the state audit report, that it puts a highlight on civilian oversight in the role that it plays for being able to address the culture, whether it's racial profiling or how people are treated in custody. And it's an extension of that. It's a dehumanizing process that a lot of law enforcement can get caught up in. And if there's not a check, if they're not disciplined, if there's not oversight, whether it's from the district attorney or civilian oversight, then it literally will spiral out of control. I saw it personally when I worked in the CRB, and I can see it now in these reports. And it does put a heavy burden on civilian oversight as a backstop for this. You have to set up a culture in which people are accountable and they're held responsible for their actions. So I appreciate it. I understand how hard your work is and also how political it is, but hopefully this will give you now the support and the ammunition you need to go forward, knowing that this is your responsibility and that you will be critically reviewed if you're not holding law enforcement responsible for these types of actions, whether it's in custody deaths or racial profiling. So thank you. I appreciate to see all of this on your agenda tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Fishman. Next, we will go to Reverend Shane Harris. Reverend Harris, this is your opportunity to address the board for general comments under public comment. You have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and hello to this board. Thank you all for your work. Today, my office of the People's Association of Justice Advocates issued a letter to the board requesting information that has not been aggregated and released as such pertaining to pertaining to a racial breakdown of deaths that have happened in San Diego County jails between 2006 and 2020. I am continuing to request this information because I feel that it's imperative and important that we address an equitable standard of the jail deaths issue, and we look at that issue through the lens of equity. And that's not it's not that anyone should be dying in our jail system, absolutely not, but I think that there's a disproportionate impact on Black and other people of color who face long wait times when it comes to in many cases never seeing a judge, never going to trial, with a backed up court system, even more so with COVID-19, and a plethora of other issues just within the context of our jail system. So I'm just coming on to say that Mr. Parker has been very, very responsive. You all brought forth data last year pertaining to a different issue within the context of the sheriff's department. And I just want to charge you to push harder, to continue to push harder for that accountability that is desperately needed, because the transparency has been minimum to none up until now. And it has the state that has had to force and forge this information to the public. It should not be this hard to access this kind of information. So I just want to ask you officially on record to please aggregate and release that data as soon as possible. We want a racial breakdown of all 185 deaths, and to also aggregate the data within the context of, did these folks ever see a judge? Did they ever face a trial? Or were they ever convicted of a crime on official record? And I think that this will begin to move us closer to addressing the jail deaths issue, but on a more specific, detailed case of equity and looking within the context of our full system, the full breadth of what is happening from the court system to the jail, and really look at equity through those lens, because and the bail system, to really look at the equity through those lens, so that we can see the full context of the issues we see within our criminal justice system. So I just want to thank Mr. Parker, was very responsive. We issued that letter today. It should be on official record at your meeting as a note of public comment. But we look forward to continuing to work. And I just want to commend all of the activists, Racial Justice Coalition, Lori Saldana, Yusef Miller, Tasha Williamson, and a number of other activists who led. Darwin Fishman was on this call, Buki. So many people led on the effort to get the audit and get the numbers. Now we need to look at those numbers through the lens of equity, and we need to see what the racial context is of what we are looking at, so that we can really, really get to the bottom of this issue, and other proponents, other aspects of this issue, like I just mentioned, the court and the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Harris. Next, we will go to Lori Saldana. Ms. Saldana, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you, members of CLERB, for the work you have done. And it's been a little over a year since I joined with others and recommended the CLERB be part of the audit at the state level. And I think we now see some pretty compelling information about lapses that need to be addressed. I used audits when I was in the legislature, and I knew how thorough they would be and extensive and careful in their analysis. And today I joined with Shane Harris and others to ask for the racial information on deaths in custody. And the sheriff, to their credit, they did provide that. It turns out that 15% of the people who have died in custody are Black. And that is triple the percentage of the proportion of the demographics of Black people in San Diego County, where it's closer to 5 or 6%. The other numbers were closer to our demographics, but clearly the racial disparities of the deaths in custody show systemic problems with how Black people are being treated in our jails. And the fact that it took not only many years of advocates asking for this information, but then a lengthy state audit that I believe contributed to the resignation of the former sheriff. And now today we had to ask once again what this breakdown was. It really doesn't need to be this difficult to come up with this information. I think the problem is that people maybe don't want to make it publicly available until they are really pushed. And so I joined with others, with Darwin Fishman, with Shane Harris, Yusef Miller. We will continue pushing because too many people have died in custody. Not enough changes have been made to protect people in custody. I wish you success in your endeavors. And when item 7 comes up, I have some additional questions and comments regarding the audit at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Yusef Miller. Mr. Miller.
Hello, this is Yusef Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition, the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. And as the other callers have mentioned about the report that has come out, it's very scathing to law enforcement, but it's not new to the community. It's something that we've seen in various reports, and this report is just the latest and of a higher ranking than the others. But the question from the community is, what is next? We've been seeing reports like this. Reports have been reflecting what the community has been saying for decades, and nothing substantial has really happened. I do want to applaud the CLERB for being in the right reform mode, in the right change mode before the audit was even put on the ground. And we've been working with you in that capacity and working. So I want to applaud you on that. But I think now that this audit has hit the streets, it's an opportunity to make a farther reach to force some of these reforms that will give you more power, more investigative strength to do what you need to do in this CLERB position. So I just want to charge you to be more daring, more far-reaching, especially when it comes to the Board of Supervisors and our asks, that our asks are something that will make changes that are substantial and that the community can put faith in. So I want to thank you for what you've done so far, but there's a lot more work to do, and I'll give further comments when the item is specific. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, we will go to Tom Packard. I believe Mr. Packard had comments general in nature. Mr. Packard, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, I think maybe I made a mistake. I wanted to speak on the audit, but as long as I have you here.
Well, no, how about this, Mr. Packard? I will get to you with the audit. There'll be some other speakers for that, and if that's okay with you, that's what we'll do.
Yeah, I thought I put in for, I think, agenda item 7, maybe not.
Yeah.
So I'll just wait.
Maybe I'm just not seeing it. I'll get back to you when we get to item 7. Okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Next, we will go to Lynn Owens. Lynn Owens, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Your 3 minutes to address the CLERB starts now.
My name is Lynn Owens. I live in the San Diego ranch, in the San Diego city. I've been watching CLERB for some months now. I'm very impressed with your hard work, diligence, and accomplishments. But now that data is available from both the CPE report and the state auditor's report on jail deaths, I'm asking you, please, please apply the same diligence to advancing meaningful improvements based on this data. We know this is tough, layered work. Thank you for doing it. That's all.
Thank you. And I do not have any other additional requests to speak under public comments. There are some for, there's one for item 5G and there's a few for item 7. But I do have one statement that one person that requested to be read into the record. So under general comment, so I will do that now. My name is Robin Sales and I represent Showing Up for Racial Justice North County. Although I'm unable to be at the meeting tonight, I want my thoughts to be read into the record and registered. You have heard from my esteemed colleagues in the Racial Justice Coalition and in the community that we want the CLERB to do its job to oversee the San Diego Sheriff's Department. We're tired of their excuses and not carrying out policy recommendations from your board and of their lies and evasions. Now that the audit is completed and damning of both the sheriff and the board, you must be transparent and persistent in your efforts to hold them accountable. It will take time for the state legislature to change the law and will surely meet resistance from police unions. The Board of Supervisors must immediately act to give you more power to be able to do your oversight role, but you must have the will to name all the issues you cover in your investigations. And in your deliberations, don't give in for the purposes of expediency. People are dying in custody and our community is watching to see how you will act. So that's Ms. Sales's statement read into the record. And with that, Chairperson Youngflesh, I have no additional requests for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and thank you to all the people who spoke. Moving on to agenda item number 3, which is the minutes approval. I know that in addition to what was attached, you had sent out an email, Mr. Parker, with minutes from the last 2 regular meetings and last 2 special meetings. Do any of the board members have any corrections to those minutes? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as written by Mr. Wilson? Is there a second? Seconded by Pastor Spriggs. And Pastor Spriggs, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll for the motion.
Okay, Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keene Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Spriggs, and motion carries unanimously. There is no agenda item number 4 for presentation training, so we will skip to agenda item number 5, which is the executive officer's report. And with that, I'll turn the floor back over to you, Mr. Parker.
Chairperson Youngflesh, there is one person who's requested to speak on item 5G, which is part of my executive officer report. And so
Okay.
that person is Natalie Nishat. Ms. Nishat, your 3 minutes to address the clerk starts now.
Hi, I apologize. I should have listed agenda number 7, so I'll raise my hand again during that time.
Okay,
Apologies.
very well. Thank you. I'll call you on number 7. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. And if there's no other requests to speak on agenda item number 5, which is executive officer's report, then I would turn it back again to you, Mr. Parker. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll try to make this as short as possible, but there's a lot to cover. So on January 12th, CLERB members Buki Domingos, Nadia Keene Ayub, Bonnie Kank, and Marianne Pintar, and CLERB investigators Brianna Chiesa, William Graham, and Claudia Wigfall had their introductory meet and greet virtually with former Sheriff Gore, Acting Sheriff Martinez, and the San Diego County Sheriff's Department command staff. This is normal. This normally what happens for our new investigators and our new CLERB members, and that happened on January 12th. In reference to a recent CLERB inquiry pertaining to the inventory of non-operable cameras and the timeframes the cameras will be repaired and information as to the camera's maintenance cycle, Sheriff's Department responded to that inquiry, CLERB's inquiry, and indicated that sworn staff do not have the responsibility over the maintenance and repair. The Department of General Services for the county does. I will report back when I have additional information from the Department of General Services. I would anticipate being able to give you some kind of report back in depth next month. On February 8th, so earlier today, as mentioned in public comment, Reverend Shane Harris of the People's Association of Justice Advocates discussed with me obtaining the racial breakdown of the 185 inmates identified by the California State Auditor's Office audit as those folks dying in the custody of the Sheriff's Department between 2006 and 2020. Of course, I expressed my willingness and the willingness of the board to compile the information, do whatever we can do to provide the demographic information of those folks who are dying in custody. It should be noted that, and we'll talk about this later under item number 7, for obvious reasons, as we'll detail, we don't have a record of all 185 deaths. So it's gonna be very difficult for me as the executive officer to compile that information from what we have, because we did not investigate, as you'll see later, upwards of 50 some, and it will talk about later. And then we only recently began collecting the demographic information last year, which will be put into our annual report for 2021 when we release that. And then we'll also go back to 2020 and put that. So I'll be able to provide racial information on those folks who've died, the demographics, for the last 2 years. I'll see what we can compile as we move forward to obviously provide as much information as possible. But just heard that the Sheriff's Department provided that information, as Ms. Saldana stated. So I will definitely provide whatever we have on file and record here at the CLERB. So we'll talk about that as we move forward. So obviously I actually viewed Reverend Harris's subsequent press conference via Zoom, and then did in fact receive his official request as stated in public comment. Obviously, again, we continue to be committed to focusing on all death investigations under CLERB's jurisdiction, and as time passes, to become a much more reliable provider of data in an attempt to identify systemic issues and trends with the goal of obviously preventing deaths in custody. As I mentioned, the 2021 annual report that we're going to begin compiling will contain a breakdown of race of all deaths occurring in 2020 and 2021. And I must touch on our independent, I don't know how many people remember, but before the state audit was even asked for, we as CLERB asked for an independent analysis of the in-custody death data. And it took several months to go through the procurement process, but we're at that point. I can give a further update in a bit, but I do want to touch on our independent in-custody death data report will not provide an exact breakdown of each death by race, but instead uses race to better understand the differences in county populations, specifically how a county's racial breakdown correlates to the county's in-custody death rate. We'll talk more about that when this report is released publicly, which I anticipate happening in April. As far as the CLERB member vacancy updates, District 1 personnel are still reviewing applications for its vacancy. As we know, Chairperson Youngflesh's term has expired, and she's graciously volunteering to continue on as chair until a replacement is appointed. At this point, nothing has changed from last month. We believe a nomination to the Chief Administrative Officer may happen this month for her replacement. And then District 3 is the same as it was last month. They're still conducting interviews for its vacancy. In reference to the investigative workload and classification report, which is attachment B, 6 new cases in January as compared to 8 from last year. There are 8 cases on tonight's agenda, 2 of which are death cases. At the end of January, there were 76 active cases. 28 of those were open death cases. But as you're going to see, and as I hope you're seeing already, we have documents for 12 of those death cases. We have documents from the department for 12. So we're waiting for documentation from the other 16. Those 12, based on some changes in our policies that we've been already implemented before the audit, as far as timelines, you're going to see those 12 cases on your agenda in the next 3 months. We have the materials, and we're going to get them done within the next 3 months. That is our internal goal. That's what's right for everyone involved. So that's what we're going to do. Last month, there was one new Sheriff's Department death case that we invoked. It was an apparent suicide after a traffic stop. There were no deaths in custody in the detention facilities in January. There are currently 8 open uses of force resulting in great bodily injury without a complaint, which you can see we're working those 2. Those are a priority. Last month we had 12. Now we have 8. So these are the priority cases that we're continuing to work and again make priorities as they should have been. There are 2 open discharges of firearm without a complaint and 1 use of force at a protest or First Amendment protected event. As far as attachment C, our CLERB reports by due date and CLERB reports by case number. Again, I encourage you to look at the CLERB report by due date, and you're going to see that for the first time in recent memory, I mean, as far as I can remember, even during my first short tenure here, there are no cases scheduled to time out for almost 2 months. And you might say, well, that's still 2 months. Yeah, that's better than 2 days and 2 weeks and a month, which is what it was for the longest time. It was ridiculous. And at this point, we're at the point where with the additional staffing, our well-trained staff, with the prioritization, you're going to see some movement. And I hope that the public and the departments and all of our stakeholders appreciate that and see that they're just going to be thorough, not just expedited, but there'll be thorough investigations as well. So after that one case, there's one case that's going to time out in about 2 months. After that, there is not a case that's going to time out for at least for 3 months. So again, we're in a very good position. We're getting where we need to be, better than we've ever been. Our obvious emphasis continues to be on the prioritization and investigation of death cases. And pursuant to our updated death investigations policy that I touched on, these cases will be completed within 3 months of assignment to the investigator. Finally, well, not finally, but attachment D is the executive officer correspondence to the full CLERB. So last month, I sent 3 general media article compilations containing a total of 21 articles. I did send one email announcing the January 25th CLERB special meeting in reference to scheduling a date and time for the town hall in reference to the Center for Policing Equity report commissioned by the Sheriff's Department. And then finally, I sent 2 media article compilations pertaining to Sheriff Board's retirement, and there were 8 total articles in those compilations. As far as the policy recommendations pending responses, there are 2 policy recommendations pertaining to death cases. The department just received the Alvarez one from us very recently. So I didn't anticipate any kind of response. I know they're still working on the others. As you can see, we have made a request for staff response to death scenes both of the Sheriff's Department and of the Probation Department, and we're still awaiting responses to those recommendations that we made a few months ago to allow us to respond to those death scenes to increase our independence. There are no policy recommendation responses that I can share with you tonight. We are waiting for the request for report back in reference to the concerns identified in the CPE report and the Sheriff's Department. In our letter to them, we asked they give that to us within 60 days, which would be the March meeting. So we're hopeful that we'll have a presentation next month on the March agenda in reference to the Sheriff's Department addressing those concerns in the CPE report. We had forward to the departments, anytime we sustain a finding, we forward to the departments a letter telling them as such and requesting that the use of progressive discipline is allowed, because we are not privy to the discipline that certain deputies or probation officers have in their file, so we can't make a specific recommendation. So we recommend progressive discipline, and the department just received 2 of the 3 that are listed here. So we're waiting for responses from them, but they just received those requests. And then finally, there are no sustained findings responses that I received. And with that, unless there are any questions for me, that's my executive officer report. Ms. Pintar?
Yes, thank you, Paul, for that, and appreciate all of your updates. I just want to follow up again. I know that you just reported that we have not heard back yet from General Services on the audit of the cameras in the detention facilities. I just want to emphasize again, and I know that there were several members of this board that felt the same, that I was disappointed that the response that we received from the Sheriff's Department was that they had no ability to answer our request or respond to our request regarding the operability or the audit of inoperable cameras in the detention facilities. I would just like to, if you don't have this information already from General Services based on your initial inquiry, I'd like to add that you ask them who in the Sheriff's Department is responsible for asking General Services to perform that audit. Again, the response that we received when we requested an audit of the cameras in the detention facilities was that was not in our purview or theirs, but that was in the purview of General Services. But the more I thought about that response, it occurs to me that somebody in the Sheriff's Department must have to ask General Services to repair these cameras, to replace them. So I'd like to know who in the Sheriff's Department is responsible for that as well. I can address that to our liaison when that time comes, or if you think that's something you'd like to work through the General Services Department, that's fine too.
If it pleases the chair, I'd like to work with Department of General Services on that and get the specific answers to those questions, and then maybe have myself do a report back next month on what I learned from Department of General Services, if that's okay with the chair.
I think that'd be a great idea, because then you can have a more detailed report that's specific to Ms. Pintar's request. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, did you have something for the EO report, sir?
I concur with Ms. Pintar, and I would urge Mr. Parker to work with the services, the maintenance service department, because I think we could get more detailed information from them.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding the executive officer's report? Okay.
Yes, I do have one comment.
Okay, Ms. Domingos.
I just wanted to know, Mr. Parker, is there a timeline for the report back?
For the report back from Department of General Services, ma'am?
Yes.
I'm going to try to do it next month. That's what I think that would be a reasonable with everything that we have going on. And yeah, with everything we have going on, I'm going to do my best to have it to you by the March meeting.
So it'll be after, my question is just, would it be after our monthly meeting?
No, it'll be during the monthly meeting. I would imagine I would present it during the monthly meeting, like I presented the report back on the vaccine from the Health and Human Services last month. I would imagine the same.
Mr. Ware?
Yes, I just have a comment on Ms. Pintar's statement on the cameras. or the maintenance of the cameras not coming under our jurisdiction as CLERB. And I just want to know who determines that, if that is something that continues to come up in our area. Who determines the jurisdiction piece?
May I give that a shot, Chairperson? Yeah.
Yes, please, Mr. Parker.
Well, ultimately, when we ask the department for a report back, they'll assess the report back, right? And they will determine whether or not it falls within our rules and regulations, our charter and our code. And if I don't agree, then I would say something to the department. But in this specific case, the maintenance, what was specifically asked for, I will agree with the department, does not necessarily fall, it does not fall within the jurisdiction of CLERB, because we only have jurisdiction over the sworn members of the department. And if they don't have any responsibility for the maintenance and the repair and those type of issues, then this would not be our jurisdictional issue. Now further, if the only way you could really kind of look into this, and if we identify during the course of our investigations, during the course of the investigation of complaints, that there are systemic issues pertaining to the complaints. But again, I contend, and I think the county council would agree, that it has to go along with the allegations and complaints that we have jurisdiction over. For example, if we determine systemic issues in medical care right now, well, if we think that there are systemic issues, we don't have jurisdiction. So that's kind of problematic, that we really can't look into that without that appropriate jurisdiction. Does that help, Mr. Ware?
Well, it helps, but it doesn't satisfy, but it helps.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Pintar?
Two things. I actually had my hand up about the Center for Policing Equity report, but I'm going to follow up again on this issue, because I hear what you're saying, Mr. Parker, that general services and general maintenance does not fall within our jurisdiction, but we have jurisdiction over the investigations into these problems in the detention facilities. And we are constantly being asked to review these cases, and we are constantly seeing in that backup that the tape was not available because the camera was inoperable. So I don't understand how it can be argued that this is not within our jurisdiction. So I will not say anything more about that, but that's how I feel. The second thing I wanted to just ask, if the response to our request to address the concerns identified in the CPE report is coming back to us at our March meeting, will we receive a written response from the Sheriff's Department prior to that board meeting that we can review, that will be part of the agenda, that the public can review prior to the actual board meeting? I think that would be appropriate. I think that the public would like to see what that response is before they, so they can weigh in when we have our meeting.
Chair Youngflesh, I would have to obviously defer to the department for what they're willing to do prior to our meeting, as opposed to coming to the meeting with a presentation. If they so choose to do that, like we've asked them to do, I'd have to defer to the department, Chair Youngflesh.
I understand, and I'm not sure if it would be the appropriate time for the department to address this, if they prefer to do that, or if you'd like to work with them and communicate that to Ms. Pintar or the other board.
It's up to Ms. Pintar. Obviously they're here at the meeting now. However, I can address this with them tomorrow and see what they're willing to do, and then get back to the board with additional information.
Okay. I think that's great, Mr. Parker. Ms. Pintar, of course, if you have direct questions for them, there will be a section in which you can address them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Delaney?
I just wanted to add something to Ms. Pintar's concerns about the detention center cameras. I think that's something that we could address when we do some of our detention facility inspections, because these are things that have come up in our cases, and so I think we could save it for then, for those opportunities.
And if I may, yes, Vice Chair Delaney, that is true, because as a reminder to all of the board members and to members of the public who are listening, Our detention facility inspections are going to start this year. We work with the Sheriff's Department to draft a handbook, and what we are going to tailor our inspections for each facility based upon the complaints or issues that have been brought forward over the preceding 2 years from our complaints, which would include, cameras or whatever has come up over those 2 years, to include deaths, uses of force, and then specific to complaints. So that will be covered during specific certain detention facility inspections, of course.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I concur with Ms. Pintar and with Mr. Ware. And I asked that the executive officer, Mr. Parker, work with our Sheriff's Department liaison in the department to come up with a mechanism where someone is held responsible and accountable for ensuring the maintenance is done and the operational checks are done daily. Again, we've got a bureaucratic layers here where no one is accountable or responsible. And again, I asked Mr. Parker to explore a mechanism with the Sheriff's Department and our L&O in holding somebody accountable and responsible and detailing how that's going to be done.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from any board members? Okay. Seeing none, then I will move on to the next agenda item, which is the board chair's report. The only thing I have other than to thank staff, especially for their work during the staffing shortage and their continued dedication and hard work, is also to thank our liaisons who are here tonight. Additionally, I just want to remind the board members that the Form 700 filing will be due by April 1st. If you have any questions regarding what that means and what that entails, I'd ask that you reach out to CLERB staff to help you through that process. Moving on to agenda item number 7, I know that there's a number of public comment regarding this agenda item. Before we go into it, I just want to, again, notify the public of the process. So I'll go ahead and call this agenda item. We'll open up public comment. If there's anybody who wants to speak on this agenda item, I would ask they come forward during that section and speak. After that section closes for public comment, we will then move to the discussion of agenda item number 7. This is to have a consistent approach. We'll do that with the remaining agenda items, numbered agenda items, and also to be in line with what other boards typically do. So for agenda item number 7, with that being said, is there any public comment?
Chair Youngflesh, we have 2 items under number 7. We have 7A, which is the teleconferencing option, but then 7B is the audit report. So perhaps we can break it down to 7A first. Then
I agree, that would be a good way to go to lack any confusion. So 7A, is there any public comment? Again, this is the continuance of teleconferencing.
It looks as if for 7A, the teleconferencing, it looks as if Ms. Saldana would like to address the board. Are you ready for that, Chair Youngflesh?
Yes, please address the board, Ms. Saldana.
Thank you. I want to encourage, even as things improve in terms of COVID, I'd like to encourage this board to continue with some form, even if it's a hybrid form of these meetings, so that people who are not able to participate in person can still make comments, share their views. And so I realize we're not at that point yet, but looking into the future, even as our restrictions are lifted, please also provide a way for people to participate who are not able to travel to your actual physical location. Thank you.
And thank you. Chair Youngflesh, that is the only public comment for 7A.
Okay, and is there any discussion? I see that Vice Chair Delaney, let me start off by saying the public comment on that is closed. And with that being said, Vice Chair Delaney, do you have any discussion, or are you raising your hand to make a motion regarding 7A?
Raising my hand to make a motion.
Okay, and I understand, Council, that there's specific language that you would like to have read into the record. If you could actually read that language for the motion, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
I have it, counsel, if you'd
Oh.
like me to read it.
I have it too. Do
Okay, you're up.
you'd like? Okay, so the appropriate motion for this would be to find that CLERB has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and that state and local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing.
Thank you, counsel. And I assume Vice Chair Delaney that that is the motion that you're supporting.
That is correct.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Keenan. And Pastor Spriggs, if you can please call roll again.
Yes, Susan Youngflesh,
Here.
Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia Keene Ayub,
Yes.
Bonnie Kink,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Sprague. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 7B. And so this is the California State Auditor's Office Final Report 2021. And I understand that there are a number of public comments with this, Mr. Parker, so I would open the floor for public comment.
Yes, please, Chair Youngflesh. So at this point, with your permission, I'd like to move forward and Mr. Packard. Mr.
Yes,
Packard.
can you hear me?
We can, and your time starts now.
Yeah, I hope I can take a few seconds going off issue back to item 5 because of building on Ms. Pintar's comments. I think that the sheriff's response is basically that was the Homer Simpson defense of it's not my fault. And I
Mr.
agree.
Parker, I apologize, but the way that we're running these meetings now is that your comments have to be specifically on the agenda item, which would be 7B.
Okay, good. Sorry, my apology.
No, thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can follow up later. I'm speaking as a member of Showing Up for Racial Justice North County. I'm grateful that the state audit has reinforced and elaborated upon with great authority the concerns that UT reporters and community members have been raising with you for some time. Please don't let the sheriff once again get away with dismissing information, criticizing analysis methods, and offering general platitudes. In that vein, I hope that the in-custody death data analysis project will not end up being mainly a stalling tactic by the sheriff. Thanks in particular to Paul Parker for his public comments on the audit announcement. And thanks to you all at CLERB for your recent, more proactive work on systemic change. You'll need to continue and go much further, given what the audit shows. Thanks again for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Packard. Next, we will go to Lori Saldana. Ms. Saldana.
Yes, thank you. So the audit specifically made recommendations to CLERB regarding investigations of all deaths within the 1-year timeline to ensure it completes investigations. They recommended that you revise your rules and regulations by May 2022 to prioritize these investigations above all other investigations. And also recommended that you revise your rules and regulations by May 2022 to include investigating natural deaths as part of your responsibilities. So, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we are, as a community, here to make these requests. And now the state auditor has made these requests as well. And I really would like to know if you will commit to revise your rules and regulations by May 2022, as this audit is recommending, and ensure that as close as justice is possible under these circumstances, that we get closer to that within the 1-year time limit. So that's my comment, and really more of a question is if you will all commit to this May 2022 change in your regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Natalie Michaud.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for the time to speak. I appreciate it. And similarly, thank you for all of your hard work and efforts recently. I also just wanted to kind of echo what has been said so far in pushing harder, with this report and the audit that has come out. Thank you to the activists that have pushed on this and made this possible. And I just particularly wanted to call out one area of concern, as there are many, which is the Sheriff's Department having not implemented certain key recommendations from external oversight entities before. So I think this gives us a critical opportunity again for CLERB, engaging with the department and saying, how are we not going to let this happen again moving forward this time, and just not repeating patterns over and over again. So again, thank you to those who made this audit possible, and I hope you'll continue to press harder than ever in ensuring that mitigative actions are taken to address these egregious discrepancies outlined in the report. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Yusef Miller.
Thank you. This is Yusef Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition and the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego. And as it pertains to this report that was recent, that comes out about the in-custody deaths, when we look at the custody of people who are maintained in these jails, we see that law enforcement is doing jobs that they shouldn't be involved in. For example, housing our mental health, people with mental health problems, criminalizing mental health, so much so that people are there for minor infractions, are held over in law enforcement facilities, and they lose their lives before it's time for them to go to court or even see a judge. As we look at drug rehab, it's the same kind of issue where we need more facilities for rehab and not for incarceration. It seems to be the root, part of the root of this whole issue is that the Sheriff's Department are involved in jobs that they're not trained for, and we shouldn't hire out to make law enforcement more specialized in this area. We should send them where they're supposed to go. They're supposed to go to mental health facilities if they did not commit a violent crime. They should go to drug rehab facilities if they did not commit a violent crime. And criminalizing the homeless is more of the same issue. Our homeless brothers and sisters have a high percentage of mental health conditions and usually a high percentage of drug addiction. So when we look at initiatives like the MCRT, Mobile Crisis Response Team, that's the direction we should be going, and not to incarcerate these people who need other types of services, and get law enforcement back into enforcing law instead of housing people in the criminal justice system. So when we look at this report, please understand as you make these reforms that we need to also reform the intake process where people are properly placed in mental facilities, health facilities, or rehab facilities, or even homelessness facilities instead of incarceration. That is not the way. And we've been paying for that. The community has been paying for that with loss of life of loved ones. And we cannot go back. Once we make these mistakes, we cannot go back. So hopefully we can consider that when we're looking at reform. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Youngflesh, I do not have any additional requests to speak on 7B.
Okay, and Mr. Parker, I understand that you may have some comments that you would like to, well, first off, let me say, with no additional comments from the public, I'll go ahead and close the section of public comments. And with that, Mr. Parker, do you have anything you'd like to add as far as 7B?
I have plenty. Well, I see that.
Ms.
Okay,
Domingos,
Ms. Domingos.
I do see your hand up. Would you like to speak before Mr. Parker presents?
No, at this point, I would reserve my comments for after he speaks.
Okay, thank you.
Very well, thank you. What I'd like to do is I want to provide an overview, just so we're all on the same page. It was a lot to read. It was a very extensive report, and it dealt with two entities, obviously, the Sheriff's Department and CLERB. I will really dive into, obviously, CLERB, especially, I mean, that's who we are. And I'll talk about the recommendations that were made and how we agree with every one of them and how we've already implemented many of them. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think it's fair the Sheriff's Department should, of course, speak for itself, and they did. They provided a response to the audit, which is part of the audit. And what I just thought I'd like to do real quickly, just so all the board members know, in case you haven't had a chance to dive through and read all of it, I'm just going to cover briefly the recommendations that the state made to the Sheriff's Department and the Sheriff's Department's initial response to them. I think that's fair to do. It comes right out of the report, but that way we're all on the same page. And if I miss something, I apologize to the department in advance and to the board members for not being thorough, but I think I kind of got it all. All right. So there were several recommendations that the state made to the Sheriff's Department. Obviously, there were concerns with the numbers of deaths, and we can talk about that from CLERB's perspective only, and that's what we'll do here in a minute. But the Sheriff's Department it was recommended that the Sheriff's Department address its intake screening, specifically that there should be qualified mental health providers as the more appropriate staff to conduct the mental health screening portion of the intake process. The Sheriff's Department concurred and said that basically they're hiring additional staff to fulfill these roles. And again, I'm not getting to the whole response, I'm just giving the general overview of their response. There was also a recommendation about the medical and mental health follow-up, and there were 3 recommendations. The department concurred with 2 and said it would reevaluate its policies and procedures on the psychological follow-up that is provided. In reference to safety checks, and this is something that we as CLERB have made recommendations on safety checks, and we have actually sustained findings against deputies on safety checks, failure to conduct them appropriately. The Sheriff's Department said that they are going to reevaluate their current policy and procedure and include in that the best practices that currently exist. They're going to formalize into their policy and procedure its current practice of conducting video audits of random safety checks. So they were recommended that they do these audits. The Sheriff's Department does them per their response, but they just don't have it formalized into policy and procedure, and that's what they've committed to doing. As far as a recommendation that sworn staff, upon discovery of a medical emergency, initiate CPR immediately. The Sheriff's Department has responded and said that it's already covered in their policy and procedure, and that the deputies do so when it's safe to do so. As far as in-custody death follow-up, there are 3 recommendations that the state made, and the Sheriff's Department concurred with all 3 recommendations. As far as their Critical Incident Review Board, CLERB, it's taken a lot of flack for being confidential, not released to the public. So that the state auditors said that CLERB should include a review of natural deaths. The department has indicated that they're willing to do so, and they're going to start a pilot program to do so in February, well, this month. Also, the state recommended that they publicize the facts and recommendations from these CLERB meetings that they have. The Sheriff's Department responded saying that those meetings are attorney-client privileged, and the effectiveness and thoroughness would be effectively removed. They wouldn't be as effective or thorough if that attorney-client privilege was removed. That's the response to that. There were 2, actually, kind of like 2.5 recommendations about CLERB specifically to the department. The first one was to include CLERB in the death notification process. Well, we already are included in the death notification process, but as we all know, that occurs a little bit after the fact. It occurs after the investigation has been initiated, responded to, and whatnot. So that was one recommendation. And then one of the other recommendations was that CLERB should have a staff member present at the initial death scene. Well, for everybody on the call, everybody in the public and the department, we made this policy recommendation several months ago in an attempt to increase our independent investigation. So this coincides with our recommendation, and we are waiting for a response. And then the final recommendation was to encourage staff, the sheriff's staff, to cooperate in CLERB's investigations. The sheriff's response indicated that CLERB has subpoena power, and CLERB can do what it wants and subpoena whomever it wants. And we all know that that's true, but we also know that we can subpoena whomever we want, but they don't have to testify. So that's what happened before in many occasions. When we used our subpoena power, that is how come this agreement was put in place, to facilitate them not testifying when they get there, but to facilitate an exchange of information. So with that said, let me go into the recommendations that the state made about CLERB specifically. As you know, they made 6 recommendations. And so for the public to know, there were 6 recommendations made. We agreed with and accepted all 6. They're pretty basic, and they're things that we should have been doing anyway. So let's talk about them. Our response is part of the audit. It's I don't know what page, I think it's page number 75 through, it's 75 in the audit. I have a 120-page audit, page 75. Recommendation number 1 to CLERB was to discuss and modify its current agreement with the Sheriff's Department and the labor organization to allow CLERB's investigators to conduct independent interviews of Sheriff's Department sworn staff. I'd already been doing that. Met with the Deputy Sheriff's Association president in the last quarter of 2021, along with counsel and our outside counsel. We started those conversations. Everybody understands that that's what's needed. And so I'm continuing those conversations to try to make sure that we don't waste our time. We don't waste anybody's time. We get the information we need as we need it, because right now we only get them through written questions, as we all know. So that's something that's in progress. We agree, in progress. Recommendation number 2, develop a comprehensive training manual for its investigators that outlines standard procedures for investigations. The manual should include a specific section dedicated to investigations of in-custody deaths, including guidance for evaluating the circumstances leading up to an in-custody death, such as the decedent's mental health history and the appropriateness of the decedent's housing assignment. We agree. While it's true, we don't have a physical standalone comprehensive training manual. It's true. It's embarrassing, but it's true. We don't. We have a very detailed handbook that we do provide to our new trainees, and we do cover investigations, specifically death investigations, through our training program. We provide them with a user guide, report templates, and topics in the resource manual that we give them. We also talk about deaths, as I mentioned, but we're going to institute and create a comprehensive training manual by the end of this month. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's the practices that we already have that we're going to formalize. And this training manual will include a specific section, obviously dedicated to investigation of in-custody death. It's the most important thing we do. Despite the current absence of this training manual, trainees are specifically instructed to evaluate the circumstances leading up to in-custody death and to include a review of the decedent's mental health history and the appropriateness of the housing. In addition to these topics, they're also instructed to evaluate the timeliness and thoroughness of welfare checks conducted on the decedent by deputies and assess whether the deputies appropriately determined that a life-saving emergency existed and responded accordingly. If there was any semblance of transparency and civilian oversight, which of course we're pushing for in this state, the public could see that everything that I just said, we address in our death cases. Now, we address it, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as we move forward. We address it. Are we independent as we could be? Absolutely not. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But those topics are addressed. Recommendation number 3, create policies and procedures to require its investigators to finish casework on in-custody death investigations within 3 months of receiving the homicide file. These policies and procedures should also require investigators to attempt to independently verify any information they receive from the department, to thoroughly review deputy statements and reports from the file, and to request interviews with relevant detention staffs and other witnesses in all instances where they identify discrepancies or missing information. Of course, we agree. I have directed that the completion of in-custody death investigations would be done within 3 months of case assignment. That's why it's in there, because that's what I asked. That's what I've laid out for our staff before the audit was finalized. This is what we're going to do. We've implemented a revised death investigation policy we first implemented a policy last year, just revised it to include that 3-month mandate. Anybody who's been attending our meetings over the last year since I've been back can obviously say death investigations are our priority. I say it at every meeting. Our caseload and looking at how we're getting our cases done, we tend to back what I'm saying, and that's how important it is. So that is what we're doing now that we're fully staffed. That's how I can codify it into policy. Now it's like, okay, 3 months from the time it's assigned to you. So that's where we are. We are already going to, we do look for verification of deputy statements. We do look at the evidence that's provided to us from the department. We'll talk about being a little more thorough as we move forward here. Recommendation number 4, CLERB should revise its rules and regulations to include the prioritization for in-custody deaths above all other investigations. We agree. When I got here in November of 2017, I was here from November 2017 no, I lied. I was here from June of 2017 to September of 2018. When I got here in June of 17, I immediately made it a priority. The death investigations will be your #1 priority. Not first in, first out, which I've been harping on this the whole time I've been back. Death investigations are #1. They supersede everything. I went away in September of 18, came back in November of 20, and found that when I came back in November of 20, it really wasn't happening like it used to. So I immediately instituted that. Again, death cases are first and foremost. That's what we're doing. So as far as our rules and regulations, working with county council to get the verbiage, and then obviously we'll move forward from there to do so. So that's in progress. I mean, I've already said that they should be #1, and so that'll be clearly in our rules and regulations, and that will jive with our internal policies and procedures. Recommendation #5, we should revise our rules and regulations to include the clarification that investigations of in-custody deaths include those classified as natural deaths. When I got here, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but when I got here in June of 17, I was surprised to find that previous executive staff here decided not to investigate natural deaths. And so CLERB hadn't investigated a natural death for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years minimum. We'll talk about the numbers here in a minute. But so when I got here in June of 17, we instituted that, and we put it out in our annual report from 2017 that we are going to investigate natural deaths. Just because someone died of natural causes doesn't mean that there wasn't a way that things could have been done better or an opportunity for a policy recommendation or improvement in practices. So we've already done that. As far as revising our rules and regulations, that's something that I'm in consultation right now with county council about whether that can happen in the rules and regulations, or if it's something that can continue to be in our policies. I understand that the concern is that the changes that we made over the last couple of years, if the board elects not to continue on with me as the executive officer or whatever, they want to make sure that things are in place moving forward. So we will continue to work on the rules and regulation revision if that's possible to add that to that, but otherwise it's in our policies and procedures, and that's what we're going to do. That's our priority. Recommendation #6, last and final recommendation. CLERB should perform an analysis of overall trends related to these deaths, including demographic information, and determine whether the trends suggest deficiency in the Sheriff's Department's policies and procedures. It should also identify policy recommendations for improving the safety of individuals in the Sheriff's Department's custody. CLERB should include these trends and analysis in its annual reports, starting with its 2021 report. As I mentioned to those of you who were here last year when you saw the 2020 annual report and the members of the public who received it, and I presented on it, I specifically mentioned that we would, and this was last March or April that I presented this, that we would begin reporting out on, or compiling that information about the racial breakdown of folks who are dying into custody. It was not in last year's annual report, but every presentation I made about it to the public, I did break it down. It just wasn't in the report. I did have that breakdown when I would talk to the public about it. And I promised that it would be in the 2021 annual report, which it will. As far as, because that's what we need to do. That's what we have jurisdiction over, to look at the trends at that point, to see what's going on. And so we can do that starting in 2021. I'll go back to 2020, but prior to that, in reference to Reverend Harris's request, again, it's going to be very difficult for the CLERB database. I'm sure the information is not there about the race of folks who died back prior to last year. So I'm going to do the best I can. So that's that. As far as policy recommendations, everybody who's been following this board knows, specifically over the last year, we made several policy. More than half of the policy recommendations we make to the department are accepted. More than half, slightly more than half. Ones that we make pertaining to death investigations seem to be accepted more often than not. We made recent ones just over the last couple of months, and we'll continue to do that. And we'll continue to put those out in our annual report. I'll continue to talk about them every month at the monthly meetings. Those are the opportunities we believe, staff believes, and I know this board believes, that those are the opportunities that you could possibly make a positive change that could save at least one life, perhaps. And we believe that's why we're here. Yes, we're here to be independent and hold folks accountable and not advocate for anyone other than the truth. But honestly, what is more important than saving at least one life? We believe that that's the case. So those are my responses to the recommendations. That's what CLERB, by the way, CLERB, your board has signed off on this response that we sent to the state that was included in the report. But for the members of the public, real quickly, I also want to just finally wrap this up. I know I said I had a lot and I would try to shorten it, but some of the things that were brought out in the report we need to address. So we talked about the 6 recommendations, but the auditors say that CLERB is not timely, not thorough, and not independent. And they were right. I mean, for the most part, and I hate to say that because I don't want to make it seem like our staff doesn't care. They do care. The people who are here doing this job, investigating, now that we have the funding that this Board of Supervisors gave us over the last year and a half, now that we have the staffing that comes with that, now we're up to 6 investigators, you're not going to see backs against the wall and right up against the timeline anymore. That was part of the reason that that was happening. There may be some other issues, but that was really the primary cause, in my opinion. So we were not timely. You're seeing now that we are becoming more timely. We were not thorough, because when you start an investigation, you only have another month to get it done. Unfortunately, it's not going to be thorough, in my opinion. We're not going to be in that point now. And it certainly wasn't there was certainly some independent aspects of it where we would interview witnesses, where we would go to scenes, not death scenes, but regular scenes, but it was few and far between, to be sure. But obviously, these are changes that we have implemented now that you're going to see some independence. So we talked about the funding. We talked about the policy recommendations. We talked about the prioritization of death investigations to include natural deaths. We talked about the increasing in transparency of civilian oversight. That's part of the county's Board of Supervisors legislative program. We asked for that. We've also asked for the jurisdiction over anybody that provides medical care or mental health care to our inmates in custody. We believe we should have that jurisdiction, and we're going to be working with county council and labor relations to get that in front of the Board of Supervisors. Hopefully we can get that in front of the Board of Supervisors and make this happen, because then we can get the whole picture. That's us being proactive. We're not told to do that. That's us being proactive because we see the big picture. In the audit report, it says that CLERB did not investigate 185 deaths from 2006 to 2020. I lied. There were 185 deaths. CLERB did not investigate 57 of those deaths. So that's true. I didn't know that. I did not know until the audit that CLERB, prior to my arrival in 2017, did not investigate 40 natural deaths. I didn't know that. I was blown away. Completely unacceptable. I wish I could go back and change it, but I certainly can't. None of us can. There were 4 deaths allegedly not reported by the Sheriff's Department in that time period. I don't know if they were or not. I don't have a record that they were or not back in 2010, 2011. So now you're at 44 deaths. And then out of the 22 that I inherited when I came here in 2017, that had not been prioritized by previous executive staff, resulted in them timing out. They have to be done within 1 year of receiving those materials. 22 of them we had to dismiss. Out of those 22, 13 were in the custody of the Sheriff's Department. So there's your 57. Almost 1/3 of the deaths that occurred, CLERB didn't have any role in, or CLERB didn't fulfill its mandate, either because they weren't notified or because they let those 13 deaths time out. As I've said before, and I'm confident, if one case times out while I'm here, I'm gone. I mean, what's the point? Why would I be here if we allow one regular case to time out, let alone a death case? So that's my commitment to the public, to the stakeholders, to you, the board. We will not let this happen. It's unacceptable. I believe that with the new executive officer, the new board that we have, the CLERB board, the new Board of Supervisors, the increased public awareness, participation, involvement, care, concern, feedback, and people may not like to hear this be said, but we also, I believe, at this point, have the appropriate support. We have the appropriate level of support from the folks that I interact with, both at the probation department and the Sheriff's Department, and their chain of command. I believe it. We are getting what we ask for. Everybody understands the need for transparency, independence, cooperation, and we're getting it now more than we ever have. And I'm looking forward to moving forward to get even more for the reasons I've laid out and for where we want to go. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Chairperson Youngflesh, for any questions or comments.
Thank you for your report, Mr. Parker. And at this time, I'd open it up to the board members if they have any questions or comments.
Yeah, I did want to speak. I was waiting for Mr. Parker to finish.
Okay, Ms. Domingos, please go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Parker, for that very, very thorough report and response to the statewide audit. I think it was very well done, especially because there was something you didn't do, which I'm very pleased with. I did not hear you say, or I did not understand you say, this was before my time, I had nothing to do with it. Let's look forward. You attempted to address the issues that even happened before you got on the CLERB, and you have actively worked towards resolving the issues moving forward. So what we have, you know, control and jurisdiction over moving forward, because the past, unfortunately, there isn't much we can do. So my comments were, and I'm glad you spoke the way you spoke, because I know that agenda item number 8 has to do with the ad hoc, so I'll wait for that. But based on your comments, I know that this is, so we heard you speak, board members have heard you speak. I'm sure the public has heard you speak, but I, at this point, would like to, I don't know if it's the right time to make a motion, Madam Chair.
Well, I see that Mr. Ware still has his hand up to speak as well. You can make a motion. I don't know if a motion is necessary on this agenda item. Is it, Mr. Parker?
Yes, it has to do with something else. I want to make a motion that has to do with 7B. And then, of course, it can be opened up for discussion.
Chair Youngflesh, the item is worded as such so that if a motion or action wants to be taken by your board, that it can certainly do so.
Okay, well, you can make a motion. However, I do have Mr. Ware's hand still up, so possibly prior to that motion being made, because then he would have to address that motion, I would like to have his comments be heard, and then I'll go back to you, Ms. Domingos, to make your motion and then have comments on that. I just want to make sure that it's clean and as far as how we're addressing everything.
That's fine.
Mr. Ware?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Parker, thank you for the report. Thank you for your professionalism. I definitely agree with Ms. Domingos as well. That's very a breath of fresh air to own even something that is not even your responsibility. But as we go forward, we'll learn from that. And I appreciate you taking the lead and your team taking the lead in that. And I said it before that I appreciate how you uplift your team, because your team is very solid. They're doing a great job as well. I just have a question on of the recommendations made in the report. Are there any of those recommendations that we're not already addressing or have already addressed? And if so, can you elaborate on those?
The 6, thank you, Mr. Ware. Thank you for your kind words, especially about the team. So in reference to the 6 recommendations that the state made about us, we're addressing all of them. We've agreed with and are in the process of, or already have addressed all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. And Ms. Domingos, if you will, Mr. Wilson has his hand up now. I haven't forgotten about you. I just want to make sure that we have all the comments, and then I'll go to your motion. Mr. Wilson?
I too wish to echo Ms. Dominguez and Mr. Ware's comment for Mr. Parker taking charge. And also I want to congratulate him on forming a team of investigators. And they have been absolutely stellar. And I must recognize Ms. Setzer, who has been a real backbone and always available to answer questions. So congratulations to you and your team, Mr. Parker and Ms. Setzer. And I sincerely appreciate you taking on and directly addressing all these issues that we've been dealing with. And I applaud you for doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I can tell you that the 6 people we have on our investigative staff are now, these are the group of people we want to move forward with, and these are the ones that the public's going to see a very good work out of. You'd be very impressed with them. I know I am. I'm honored. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience, Ms. Domingos. If you'd like to go ahead and make your motion.
Yeah, based on that very thorough, detailed report from Mr. Parker, I would like to make a motion to have a town hall in the month of March, independent from our monthly meeting, to address and hear from the public regarding the statewide audit that was released on February 3rd of 2022.
Okay. And is there, Pastor Spriggs, I see that, is your hand up or you're trying to second a motion? Second? Okay.
I will second that.
Well, Ms. Kank, Pastor Spriggs beat you to it, but I appreciate your enthusiasm. If there's no discussion on this, then I would ask Pastor Spriggs to call roll. And you're muted. Thank you.
Yeah. Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Eileen Delaney,
Yes.
Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
Nadia, Keen Ayu,
Yes.
Bonnie King,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
A very enthusiastic yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Is there any other discussion that any board members want to have on 7B before we move on?
Yes, I don't know if I need to make an amendment to this motion that has just passed unanimously. I absolutely forgot to include that we, the ad hoc committee for racial disparity, racial profiling, would like to spearhead this town hall. And I don't know how to add that into the motion.
Ms. Hoffman, can I ask for your guidance on this?
Yeah, the motion's passed, so I'd recommend just making a new motion to implement that.
Okay. Ms. Domingos, then my understanding is you would like to make a new motion in support of the ad hoc committee spearheading the town hall. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a second for the motion? Seconded by Mr. Wilson. And again, Pastor Spriggs, if you don't mind calling roll.
Susan Youngflesh,
Yes.
Eileen Delaney,
Actually, I have a question, if I may, prior to voting. Council, is that okay? Is we getting a discussion?
All right, you're breaking up a little bit. What's the question?
Oh, I said, I have a question. I asked the question. Am I having, can you hear me?
Yeah, so you can go ahead.
So my question is this, are we as a CLERB board, is it within our jurisdiction to allow a subcommittee to hold a meeting? Or should it be as a CLERB town hall? I just need clarification on that.
I believe it's not an actual meeting, it's a town hall.
I meant a town hall. Yeah.
And
So
then
can a subcommittee of CLERB host a town hall, or does it have to be hosted by CLERB?
I believe that and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Domingos, but your motion is that you're spearheading the town hall, meaning that you're leading the town hall as the subcommittee, but yet CLERB is actually hosting it.
Exactly, like the one that's going to happen on the 22nd.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right, just needed to clarify that. Yes, sir.
Pastor Spriggs, can you continue, please?
okay. Pastor Robert Spriggs Jr., yes. Buki Domingos,
Yes.
thank you. Nadia Keen Ayu,
Yes.
Bonnie King,
Yes.
Marianne Pintar,
Yes.
Tim Ware,
Yes.
and G.I. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Pastor Spriggs. Motion carries unanimously. Is there any other motion to be made on 7B by any of the board members? And Ms. Hoffman, I do see that your hand is raised.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. I realized I mentioned this to the subcommittee, but not to the rest of CLERB. Following on a discussion we had last meeting, a town hall would actually be noticed as a special meeting of CLERB, just to allow the entire board to attend pursuant to the Brown Act.
Thank you. Ms. Domingos, your hand is still raised. Did you have something further?
Please disregard. I'll wait for agenda item 8, where the report back for the ad hoc committee is required.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pintar?
Thank you. I don't think we need a motion. First, I wanted to thank for my question, but thank Paul for his thorough report and the thorough response on behalf of CLERB to the audit. I wanted to ask Mr. Parker if, well, let me backtrack a minute. I did make a note here, and I should have maybe referenced it earlier when I was asking about the cameras in the detention facility. On page 40 of the audit report, Mr. Parker, there's a paragraph that talks about the fact that the San Diego County, the county grand jury in 2014 actually recommended that the sheriff's department update its surveillance system for monitoring activity in the detention facilities, and that update didn't happen. But the sheriff's department, I think in its response to the audit, said that the surveillance system would be updated this year. So in your conversations with General Services and the Sheriff's Department, maybe they can also provide us with an update on this new surveillance system that they reference in the audit, please.
Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure that I address that. Thank you.
Are there any other discussion on 7B by any of the board members or motions? Okay, seeing none, I am moving on to agenda item 8A under unfinished business. 8A is the update authority for the executive officer to work with the county staff to pursue legislation and or to add a policy to the county legislative program in support of increased transparency and civilian oversight of peace officers and custodial officers. Is there any public comment in regards to 8A, Mr. Parker?
I have not received any requests, nor do I see any requests to speak.
Thank you. Then closing public comment. I would turn this over to Mr. Parker if you'd like to give the update.
Sure, Chairman West. There really is no update. I'm going to leave this on the agenda though, so that we can make sure that it's addressed every month. At this point, I think we had mentioned before that the Board of Supervisors has added the support of increasing transparency of civilian oversight in the state of California, has added that to their legislative program. So that's where we are right now. I don't have any movement on this at this time. Once I do, I will make sure to let the board and the public know. But I will leave this on unfinished business on the agenda until there's some movement.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Is there any board member comments regarding 8A? Okay, seeing none, I'm moving on to 8B, which is another update. Authority for the executive officer to work with county staff to request that the county board of supervisors expand CLERB's jurisdiction to include personnel involved in providing medical care in county detention facilities. And again, Mr. Parker, is there any public comment on 8B?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Can you please provide an update as far as 8B, if any?
We believe that this is obviously the most important request that we're making. At this time, County Council and I will be working with Labor Relations. We're still at that process to do so. And when there's an update to provide, I will provide it. Same as the other item, I'm going to leave this on the agenda until we can provide an update to you folks and the public.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And I see that Ms. Pintar's hand is up, and then Vice Chair Delaney. Ms. Pintar.
I just would like to ask if there's anything that we as CLERB board members can be doing to support this effort. It was abundantly clear in the audit that this seems to be the place where we just don't have jurisdiction over any of the non-SWORD personnel. And right out of the gate, I read the entire report front to back. It said that the places where it might be additional staffing needs, the places where we're having the most trouble in our detention facilities is related to mental health response, and seeing these problems upon intake. So I would just like to emphasize that this seems to be really important, one of the most important things we can be pursuing. And if there's something we can do to support you, please let us know.
Thank you, Ms. Pintar. I will let you know as we move forward. I agree with you that this is the most important topic we face right now.
Thank you. Vice Chair Delaney.
I'm just reiterating what was previously said. This is so important. Without this, we only get half the story of what's actually happened, or half the facts, I should say. So very important. And if there's anything, again, that we can do, let us know.
Thank you very much. I'll continue to work with Ms. Hoffman, and if something comes up, then I'll address the board accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other board member comments or questions? Okay, I see none. So I'm going to move on to 8C. Another update, CLERB Town Hall pertaining to San Diego Sheriff's Department Center for Policing Equity Report. Mr. Parker, is there any public comment on 8C?
I see none.
Okay, thank you. And is there an update to provide for 8C?
I would defer to Ms. Domingos.
Ms. Domingos, do you have an update for 8C?
I do, with your permission, with the permission from my subcommittee chair, I would like to report on our update.
I think that's perfectly fine. I see Mr. Ware saying yes.
Okay. So we met, we meet once a week, every Wednesday, and our last meeting was, I believe, on Wednesday. I believe it was on the
second.
Ms. Domingos, I don't mean to stop you, but I believe we're talking about 8C, which is the town hall. Is that what you're talking about, or at the ad hoc committee?
Madam Chair, if I may proceed uninterrupted, please. Thank you.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're
If
addressing.
you give me a
the correct one.
second, I will explain. So please do not interrupt me. I'm asking politely again. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Domingos, if there's any crossover, I need to make sure that the public can comment on 8D first. That is the process.
So Madam Chair,
going
if you
forward.
let me land, everything will make a lot of sense.
Okay,
Thank
then
you.
I'm waiting to hear. I'm all ears. Please, Ms. Domingos.
Thank you. So looking at my calendar, I believe our last meeting for the ad hoc committee was on the 2nd, exactly. So at that meeting, we decided that we would tie in or finalize the logistics for the town hall. As we had agreed upon, it was to be on the 22nd. We agreed at that meeting that we would have a 2-hour town hall, which would be from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. And that the main topic for the town hall would be racial disparities / racial profiling at the CPE report, which is the Center for Police and Equity report that came out before the state audit report came out. And we spoke about specifics like the agenda, what that would look like, who the key stakeholders would be, who the moderator would be. And we had also spoken about drafting a flyer that will go through the following persons. So the first raw draft would go through the ad hoc committee. We meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. And then we shall present that to council and then present that to the chair for approval. Upon approval of the flyer or edits, we would then distribute that through Mr. Parker, the executive director, who we have empowered to do so as the subcommittee, provided that's approved, to key stakeholders of the community. So grassroots social and racial justice organizations, most impacted communities, Black and Brown, and allies. And so that's the update for our ad hoc committee. And I believe we had counsel at that meeting because we wanted to make sure that we were following the legalities and that we were staying within the Brown Act and how to properly conduct the town hall. And we had also said that because it's a town hall and not a classical meeting, that we would give members of the public, I believe it was 5 minutes to speak instead of 3 minutes. So that's my update. If I'm missing anything, I invite other members of the committee, Ms. Bonnie Kink, Mr. Ware, and Mr. Wilson to add, please.
Is there anything further from any other board members?
No, she did it all. Good job.
Okay, and then is there any other discussion on 8C? Okay, seeing none, I'm moving on to 8D. And this is for the ad hoc subcommittee. I know there was some overlap with the last discussion, but that being said, Mr. Parker, is there any public comment specifically on 8D?
I have none.
Thank you. Ms. Domingos or Mr. Ware, is there anything additional on 8D that wasn't addressed in 8C?
I have one thing. So today we just voted on a motion to have a town hall spearheaded by the ad hoc committee sometime in March. When we meet tomorrow, we will then come up with a date to propose. Now that I say that out loud, I realize, would it be best to propose the date today for the town hall in March, because it's going to be considered as a separate special CLERB meeting?
Ms. Hawk,
this question is for council.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of ways your board could set the town hall. You could do so here in a meeting with the majority of CLERB voting for it, or the chair can set a meeting, a special meeting, excuse me.
and I do believe, Ms. Hoffman, that depending on when the town hall is, there's the opportunity also to set it at the March meeting. Is that correct? If the town hall in later in March?
Correct.
And so depending on if there's additional speakers or if what the ad hoc committee wants to sort of address with that, it may be prudent to wait to sort of formulate a plan and sort of coordinate. That would be my suggestion, scheduling.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can address that tomorrow at the meeting.
Okay. Are there any other comments or board member discussions regarding 8D? Ms. Pintar.
Just regarding the second town hall that we voted on tonight, I would just ask my colleagues on the subcommittee to, during your meeting tomorrow, think about, I feel like we're going to get a lot of people that are going to want to talk about both at the racial profiling town hall. And maybe that's fine, but I don't know, maybe it's one big town hall. I would just ask you to think about that. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want to address both topics.
Okay. Is there Ms. Domingos?
Yeah, Ms. Pintar, that makes a lot of sense. And I believe that we did think about that, but because we are, this meeting or the town hall is specifically for public comment, we want to be fair to the public and give folks enough time, because the CPE is a big report and the statewide audit is equally a big report. And we want to make sure that folks, you know, we bring time with us. That's why we're doing 2 separate town halls, so that both reports can be addressed accordingly.
I would just maybe ask council if people do want to bring up, because it's a town hall and it's not a meeting, so the agenda is a little bit different. Is there any reason why people can't make comment, or do we just make it clear at the beginning that we're talking about one rather than the other? I just want to make sure that the public isn't confused. That's all.
Yes, so again, it is going to be noticed as a Brown Act meeting. So we will, CLERB will need to stick to the agenda. So there, If an item is not agendized, it can't be discussed at the special meeting.
Okay. Maybe it's just something that we clarify at the beginning of each town hall.
And also, sorry to interrupt you, because it is a special meeting, there is no general public comment like there would be at a regular meeting. So there'd really be no discussion on anything not on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Delaney.
You know, Marianne, you had a great point, and I think maybe tomorrow at your ad hoc meeting, you should discuss, or I would ask you to discuss maybe combining the two. And my reason is that if you only have one and you have members of the public that want to discuss two, you may have some ill will from many of them when they can't discuss which one they want to discuss. I hope that makes sense. So maybe having a combined town hall to discuss both studies might be a good idea, especially since it's a special meeting and you can only discuss what's on the agenda. Just my thoughts.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Okay, Mr. Ware.
Yes, thank you. Is there any reason why, even though we're going to talk about CPE report, for example, as the lead, to have the other audit as a second item and do the same thing in the second meeting? Even though we're going to lead on one topic, that's what we're really focusing on. And if members of the public want to address the other one, they can feel free to address that. Is there a reason why we can't do that? I don't know if I'm making myself clear on that.
I think if I understand you correctly, is you're suggesting having both items listed and having two town halls, essentially.
Correct.
And Ms. Hoffman, would there be any reason not to do it that way?
No legal reason, no.
Okay. Would I have to then approve, or the board would have to vote on adding the town hall regarding the audit report to the February 22nd town hall regarding the CPE report?
Yeah, your board can vote on that.
Okay. Ms. Domingos.
I feel very strongly that we should keep it separate. I think our community, they're intelligent enough to understand that both are separated. And I also, because what I'm thinking in the way the invite is going to be structured is we are going to do our best to get people like CPE to that first town hall and have them. So it's going to be very CPE heavy. And the second one is going to be, hopefully our invite is acknowledged, it's going to be heavy on sheriff's department, medical examiners. So folks, so everything stays focused and we take our time to address one topic, because I am just imagining that the public is going to have specific things that they want us to, recommend, or suggestions or feedback that we're going to have to take back and address appropriately. And I just don't believe that putting two heavy topics is doable in 2 hours. And the worst thing we could do is restrict people's time to 2 minutes just because we want to get everything in there. There is no reason, I don't see any reason for us to cram everything into one town hall.
Ms. Kank.
I totally agree with Mr. on that there really should be two town halls, just to give people enough time to address the issues separately.
And Mr. Ware?
No, I definitely agree of having two town halls, but I'm just focusing on the topics. I just believe, and I don't have a lot of experience on being involved with town halls, but I do have experience when people are passionate about something, and it can bleed over real quickly. So whoever's going to monitor, going back and forth to those topics, you're gonna have to be on your game at night. So if we wouldn't do that, fine, I'm fine with it too. But I can just see a lot of bleeding over, and if they don't have the leeway or the opportunity to address both the topics, whoever's going to play that referee, just be on your game that night.
Right. And just Mr. Ware, I see you, Mr. Wilson, but I have to agree with you. Speaking from experience from these meetings is definitely, I think that sometimes people are disheartened when they can't speak freely on every topic that they want to, but knowing under the Brown Act, you're confined to certain topics that are noticed. And it's definitely a hurdle to have that. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I think we need to have 2 town halls. Doing both at the same time, I think it could end up an overload and a very, very long, prolonged meeting. But I think we should front end load it and make people aware that we're talking about the CPE first and then the audit next. And if it comes up, let them know that there is a second town hall in the works. I think we have to do a good job of communicating this. I would ask that the county communications department get involved and help us out here a little bit, and making sure that we can get the message out there. But you know, I agree. 2 town halls and having both in one would be absolute overload.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Pintar.
I was just going to say, you all have convinced me, so I will take back my suggestion. I just was concerned that people were going to want to talk about both, but I'm happy to
They will.
do it that way.
They will.
Okay. And I know that Mr. Ware had expressed having both, I believe, on each town hall, but I have not heard an actual motion that's been made for having that. So as it stands right now, we just have 2 separate town halls. Is there any other discussion that needs to occur on 8D? Okay, seeing none then.
Sorry, I do have one last comment.
Sure.
On 8D. I just wanted to reiterate that typically with town halls, when the topic is set and it's on the flyer, folks that attend are very well aware. I'm also aware that it's very emotional. We're talking about people dying. But I know that our intention was to structure it to invite specific people to the specific town hall. So if folks from the community have questions, those other folks that they're trying to address might not be at that town hall. They might clear their calendar for the other town hall. So we can just redirect them, hey, this topic is going to be discussed and addressed in full at this town hall, and these people are going to be there to answer your questions. And typically that is something that folks don't get upset over.
Okay. Vice Chair Delaney.
I have a question. Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought Tim and Gary were both saying that they should have both on the agendas. Did I misunderstand?
I don't believe you did, but there's no motion for that. So there would have to be a motion to add both to the agendas.
I still think it's very important, having been through town halls and a lot of other things, you're going to get the bleed over. You're going to get people that want to talk. And if you tell them, I'm sorry, you can't talk about this tonight, even though knowing that there's going to be another one, it may be disturbing to them. So I will take a chance. I'll make a motion. I'd like to see the 2 town hall meetings. Of course, with the intro, the heavy one on the first one, but also allowing people to make comments about the other one, and then letting them know that will be discussed in full or more fully at a second town hall meeting. And that way you're covered. So that's my motion.
And then as far as the second town hall, does your motion also contain that you want both of those topics on the second town hall as well?
If somebody wants to at least make a yes, yes.
Okay. And is there a second to that motion? Okay.
Well, okay.
I'm seeing none. And so the motion.
Sorry, Eileen, they convinced me.
Pardon me?
She said they convinced her.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, then motion fails. And with that, is there any other discussion? Okay, I am moving on to 8E, which is the update for the in-custody death data review subcommittee. Mr. Parker, is there any public comment?
I have received none and I am seeing none.
Okay, do you have any updates to share regarding this item?
The Analytica Consulting, who the subcommittee selected, we've been meeting with them. I've been meeting with them weekly for the last 3 months or so. If you recall, we put this forward to do an independent analysis of the in-custody death data. We put this forward, I think, back in February or March. And as I mentioned earlier, the procurement process took quite some time before a vendor was selected and could begin work. But I've been meeting with them each week in the last 3 months. They're making great progress. The final report will be to me in March. So I'm sometime in March. So I'm looking to have the final report on the April CLERB agenda, obviously disseminated beforehand as an attachment to our agenda. But that's what I'm looking at. That's the update I have for you. That's all I have for you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I am now moving on to agenda item number 9, board member comments. Do any board members have anything they'd like to share at this time? Okay.
I do.
Okay.
It's more of a thank you to everyone as we move through this process, and a lot of different things are happening in having our first sponsored CLERB town hall. I mean, for me as a Black woman, it's really huge to give folks from the community the space to speak because often we are silenced. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Domingos. Mr. Ware.
Yeah, I too, I just want to say a big thank you to Ms. Hoffman. A very, very intelligent and professional lady. Man, I appreciate you being on our team. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Pastor.
Yes. I'd like to say thank you to everyone for really digging deep into this work that we're doing. I'm really starting to feel good about this board because I've been here a while and I have had some sleepless nights, but lately I've been able to rest. So thank you all.
Okay. Is there anything else? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I will move on to agenda item number 10, which is the Sheriff Probation Liaison query. Do any board members have any questions general in nature for the Sheriff or Probation Liaisons? Ms. Pinter, I know earlier you had a topic. I believe that I suggested you address it. Did you want to go ahead and address that?
I don't think I had, I think I addressed it to Mr. Parker about the detention cameras. I don't recall that I had another one. I'm sorry
Okay.
if I mentioned,
No, that was it.
I'm not remembering another one.
Your question.
So, sorry.
No problem. Ms. Domingos. So when we had the meet and greet with former Sheriff Gore, I had asked to know if it was possible for board members to do ride-alongs. And I was told that they would look into it and get back to us. I just wanted to know if there is an update on that, or what are the appropriate channels to go through to see if that was a possibility for CLERB board members.
And is there a liaison here that is able to answer the question for Ms. Domingos?
Yes, Ms. Young-Fletch, thank you. I'm Sergeant Brayman. If you don't know me, with San Diego Sheriff's Department, I am the CLERB liaison. And yes, we have addressed that. And if any CLERB members would like to do a ride along with patrol, certainly work through Paul, who can send me what date and time you're looking for, and we can certainly make those arrangements.
Thank you, Sergeant Brayman. Okay, Pastor Spriggs.
Yes, I was just interested in knowing how are the COVID cases coming along in custody? Are they do y'all see a decrease or increase, about the same? If you can all speak to that, I appreciate it.
We currently don't have an update on that, but we do have a public website that you can go to on, it changes daily. Sometimes they just update on how many cases and whatnot. But we did provide Paul Parker more information on how the testing and those statistics are currently being handled in the facilities right now.
Ms. Domingos, your hand is still up. Do you have a further question?
Yeah, it's in regards to I believe it's Pastor Spriggs. What he just said, I just wanted to ask about the vaccination status, because I just heard the response for the testing. Is it still that inmates are just giving at when they're being, you know, when they are being taken into the detention centers, is that the only time they're offered the vaccine, or are they offered the vaccine periodically? That I wasn't quite clear on.
Yes, they are offered the vaccination upon entry into the booking process, as well as any time that they have a medical appointment. They're offered that again and trained as well. And I believe we sent a response to that as well.
Thank you, Sergeant Brayman. Is there any other comments or questions, I mean, for the probation liaison or sheriff liaison? Okay.
I have Chair Youngflesh. I'd like to, I know that Supervising Probation Officer Barnum has an announcement to make.
I did see his hand. I was getting there. I did
Oh,
not.
I apologize, Chair
You.
Youngflesh. My bad. All right.
No, I appreciate you looking out for him. Floor is yours, Supervising Probation Officer Barnum.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to take a moment to let everybody know that we do have a new Chief Probation Officer. Her name is Tamika Nelson. She comes to us from San Joaquin County, and she began on January 31st. Additionally, I wanted to let everybody know that Ross Lewin, who you guys were familiar with for several years, has transferred to a new assignment. So therefore, we now have Brian Berry, who transferred into the internal affairs position, and he'll take a moment to address the board.
Good evening. My name is Brian Berry. I'm a supervising probation officer. I've been with the department over 20 years. I've served in just about every aspect of our department, and I hope I can put that experience to good use and be an asset to both Supervisor Barnum and to the clerk board. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome, Supervising Probation Officer Barry. We look forward to working with you. Okay, and are there any other comments or questions from the board members? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to
I thought I had one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Ware. I didn't
Sorry,
see you.
just a quick question, observation. Is this our first female probation chief? And if so, kudos to us.
What I read in the paper, at least.
All right. All right. I see you working, San Diego.
That is correct. It is in fact our first female chief probation officer.
Okay, and that's great news. And we'll move on to closed session if there's nothing else. And I would ask council to read us into closed session at this time.
Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, this board will adjourn to closed session to consider item 11 on tonight's agenda.
Thank you.
Can we take a 10-minute break?
That sounds like a great plan. We'll take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 7:45 to make it even.
Thank you.
Thank you.